Evening, everyone. Welcome to the Portsmouth City Hall Chambers for a conversation about workforce housing at the Sherburne School site. My name is Lori Waltz. I've been asked to facilitate these conversations. As you may know, there's going to be a conversation tonight that will be the identical conversation that happens on Saturday. So we are offering folks two opportunities to join us to hear the very same information and offer their thoughts about what should happen at this site. We already know it's going to be workforce housing, but there are some opportunities for the community to provide their thoughts. I want to take a minute just to recognize some people that are in the room. You may notice there are people at tables with colored paper on them and dots and index cards. And then there's people that are in chairs, maybe more in an observation role. If you are someone that wants to participate in this conversation and offer your thoughts, I welcome you to come to a table. If you're sitting in one of the chairs not at a table, that's an indication that you are likely someone who is on the PHA staff or board, or perhaps with the engineering group, or the architects, or the housing committee, or the workforce housing planning group, or maybe representatives of the city council, or representatives from New Hampshire Housing. We have a lot of experts in the room that are here to share their knowledge, but not participate in the actual community engagement. Does that make sense? So if you're sitting in those seats, I just want to make sure everybody's clear. Okay. Okay. I want to take a minute to just quickly review how the evening is going to flow. You're going to listen to me and participate in some activities to get started. We're then going to hear about what has happened to date with this project and what community engagement has already occurred and helped to inform where Portsmouth Housing Authority is at this point. And we're going to offer you some information about designs and aesthetics and amenities. You'll have an opportunity to engage. And then, of course, we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers. We have three main goals tonight. One is to gather feedback from the community. Two is to strengthen the relationship between the Portsmouth Housing Authority and the community. And I am going to take liberty and say that's not just for this project, but in general. And to also create the best design to serve the needs of the community. How many of you, can you hear me if I don't talk into the microphone? Thumbs up? Okay. Ryan, if you can hear me, that's good. I was a cheerleader, so I know how to project. How many of you have participated in a group setting where you had group agreements? Can anybody explain to me why we have group agreements? Yeah, to make it so that everybody understands how we're going to engage with each other, what the expectations are, to be clear, so that we can have a civil discussion. So what would be an example of a group agreement? Share airtime. Great. Make sure that if you've spoken once and there's other people that want to offer a comment or a suggestion or a question, that you pause for a second and wait and then ask your next question. Great. Does everybody agree with that? Nodding of head is helpful, yes. If you don't agree with it, shake your head, you know that too. Anything else? To each other and to the subject matter experts? Yeah? This is a very low energy group. I don't know, I'm gonna have to get you up and doing some jumping jacks. Oh, thank you. That's fantastic. I don't like to stand. Now we're getting really official, you guys. Look out. Thank you. Look out. I don't know what's going to happen now. Tap dance. Yeah.
Pertinent questions and answers.
Pertinent questions and answers. Like, we don't want to know what someone had for dinner. We want to know.
Focused on the conversation, on one conversation.
One conversation at a time with questions related to that conversation, not on something else that we haven't yet talked about. Does everybody understand that one? What else? How about listen to understand? Sometimes we get in the habit, I feel like I'm screaming. Sometimes we get in the habit of listening to respond because we know we want to say something. So how about tonight we listen to understand? Come on. We can always add more, and I'm the facilitator, so I'm keeping.
The last one is just to make space for clarifying questions.
Does everyone understand what that means, to assume positive intent? If you don't understand what that means, that's fine. I just want to know so I explain it. Okay. We're going to assume that everyone has a positive intention. If it comes out a little sideways and impacts someone in a little not so nice way, it's helpful to apologize for that and then move on. I'm going to add one. To help manage this conversation, it would be helpful if you raise your hand and I make eye contact with you before you start talking so that I can manage the conversation. Thumbs up? Okay. I think we get the gist. I'm now going to ask you all to participate in a little quick activity. Has anyone ever heard of the phrase connection over content? Anybody want to take a guess at what that means? Sometimes and I feel like this group is very ready for this, but you want to dive right in. You're dying. You're like, Lori, stop talking. I want to hear about what the heck is happening over there. But we're all neighbors. We're all in the same community. And it's really important to connect with the people that are in the room with you at any point in time, whether it's a barbecue at your neighbor's house and you don't know everybody. But before we get into the real discussion, I'm going to ask you to turn to your neighbor on the left or right introduce yourself. Some of you maybe already know each other or had already done this tonight, but introduce yourself, share which part of Portsmouth you're from, and why you're here. Why is community important to you? Why did you come here tonight? Or share what you had for dinner.
It's right there in the board.
I'm Logan,
We're going good. So once they come back together, hello? Okay. I didn't mean to scare you with my chimes. I am the executive director of Leadership Seacoast, and in order to get people's attention to come back to center, I use chimes, and someone that many of you in this room know used them as well, and I love it. Sometimes I ask everybody to do a downward dog, but not really. Just kidding. Does anybody care to share some of what you heard, why people are here, why you're here tonight, why your neighbor's here tonight? Please.
Elsewhere.
Thank you.
Okay. It's Tricia. We found out that we have mutual friends in common. But she's here because she has been, to some degree, involved in this process or watching this process as a community member for a while. And so she decided she wanted to come tonight to continue that dedication as being part of this process. And she is really all for more housing and whatever she can do to support more housing.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing. How many of you have been to conversations about workforce housing before tonight? That makes sense. How many of you are excited about being here tonight? I mean, I guess you kind of have to be looking forward to it. Why else would you come out on a night that's freezing cold to talk about such an important topic? All right, I'm going to get this show moving, and I'm going to introduce Andrea Pickett, who many of you may already know. And she's going to give you a bit of an update on where things are, what they've learned so far through this process.
Okay.
Do you want this?
I'm going to try and stay close to the podium. You're going to be talking with me, so you can. Thank you, Lori. Hi, everybody. I'm Andrea Pickett. I'm the Director of Outreach and Engagement with the Portsmouth Housing Authority. Workforce housing is personal to me, so thank you all for coming here tonight and taking part of this conversation. You've all introduced yourselves and taken a minute to get to know each other. So I just want to take a moment and introduce the PHA and the work that we do, because maybe some of you are not familiar with the steps that we've taken, even just over the past decade, to get here. This is a partial list of what we have been doing in this community regarding workforce housing. It's been over a decade of engaging with stakeholders and talking to community members, starting with the Mayor's Blue Ribbon Housing Committee in 2016, and Portsmouth Listens in 2017, which, have repeated again. And it's highlighted by things like opening Ruth Lewin Griffin Place and our community survey, which was 600 respondents in Portsmouth talking about the city that they love and wanting to be able to live here or loving that they live here. We're proud to be doing this work. We're proud to be serving our community. These experiences have given us a lot of insights. We've learned about the desire for affordability, accessibility, stability, a lot of illities there. I've had a chance to talk to a lot of the people in this room as well, and heard stories. I know that it's important to people to feel included. I know it's important that we have these conversations, so thank you again. And I know you are also not here to listen to me speak, and we do have our architects here in the room. So tonight, Market Square Architects is here, and Rob Harberson, I'm saying it wrong, I'm sorry, Rob. Come up here and correct me, please, is here, and he will be displaying where we are so far in the process and invite you to join in some comments and feedback and participation after that. So thank you very much. Rob? Oh, this is a little bit more of our community engagement in case he wants more reading while he walks up here.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go forward one. I'm Rob Harbison. I'm from Market Square Architects. We're right in downtown Portsmouth. I've been working in the Seacoast for about 22 years now and spent way too much time in this building. I can probably give you a by heart account of what's in those cabinets out front. I'm just going to stay here. And that's one of the things I wanted to point out. Everybody on the design team, everybody at PHA, we're all from this community. We all work here. We all care about the issue of housing. We all care about the community that this project is going to be within. And we all have to come and see all of you at grocery stores and other places downtown after this is over, and we want you to still like us. So, we've been listening for, gosh, almost, I think, 2 years now, Craig, in terms of conversations about this property. And we've been listening to a lot of different opinions. And we've heard from some people who want to take down the school and put 300 units on this site. And we've heard from other people who don't want to touch the school and leave the site exactly as it is. And we're not going to make either of those people probably happy, but we're trying to find that common ground in the middle and take into account all of the various opinions. Because this conversation is so advanced, we've arrived at a number of constraints. We would call them constraints or parameters. Really what it is answers, things that we know we have to accomplish at the end of this from all of the various stakeholders that we've heard throughout this process. Some of those things are, what are the number of units? What's the right fit? Like I said, we've heard a wide range of opinions on that, and so we know the answer is somewhere in the middle. How do we control the project cost? One thing that we've heard from the vast majority of people is affordability is really important. We need to find places that are affordable for people to live in this community. We've heard that sustainability is an important goal. And you'll notice as we go through this list, some of these parameters don't work together. Sustainability isn't so great for affordability always. It's really important long term. We think that's of value to the community. It's probably important for the long-term affordability of the project, but it can sometimes negatively affect project cost. Another item that we've heard is important is aesthetics, the scale of the buildings. How does it fit into a residential area? What does it feel like? That's something we're at the infancy of. We know that that's important. We've heard that it needs to feel of a residential scale, and that needs to be balanced with the number of units we're trying to achieve on the property. And sustainability can sometimes impact that, because the simplest way to get a really energy efficient building is to build a big shoebox. That's not always what everybody wants to see and feel. Green and open space, we've heard, is important. This is going to be a project that's within a walkable community. We want people to be able to interact with it. We want public to be able to use part of that open space. What does that feel like on the street? What does it feel like when you walk through the property? We need to park cars. We need to have enough parking to serve the building so that this can all function. If there is publicly amenity space, what are the parking that we need for that? We don't want it to be a sea of asphalt either. You know, that doesn't feel very nice in a residential community. And so that's balancing with the number of units that we have and the green open space. All of those things need to find that happy middle ground. The school, I think at this point we've heard enough information from enough of the community that we understand the school and how that feels in the streetscape is really important. So you'll see as part of the site plan that we're going to be looking at, we are proposing to keep the school. That's kind of answered for us at this point. Accessibility, both in terms of cost, who can live in this place, and also physical accessibility, moving around the property and through the buildings. All of those things we've heard are priorities. And then the amenities. What are the amenities around the property in that green and open space? And we're going to be talking about that later tonight as well. So that's not even exhaustive probably, but those are the big topics that I think we've heard along the way that we're trying to balance as we start into design. So this is the site plan that we're looking at right now, what's being proposed for the parcel. So in the back, you'll see this sort of L-shaped building. That building is proposed to be a 4-story building that will have 90 units in it. And the unit mix that I have, I think we'll get into this again later, but the unit mix that I have is 54 one-bedrooms, 24 two-bedrooms, and 12 three-bedrooms for 90 units. The average square footages for those units are right around 650 square feet for a one-bed, 920 for a two-bed, and 1130 for a three-bed, which are comfortable square footages, probably just under the industry standard, and pretty comfortable for those size units. Part of the reason we're locating that larger building in the back is because, right here in the middle of the property, approximately where that sidewalk is, there's a significant grade change. And so that 4-story building is essentially a story lower as you see it from the street. So if you're standing on the street, you would only see the upper 3 stories of that building. It's also set back from the school and behind this shorter building that's proposed in the front. And I know, Corey, you're going to speak a little bit more about civil in a minute, but this front building is, that one is 3 stories, and we're going to talk about roof lines in a minute, but it's 3 stories. That one I have 6 one-beds, 11 two-beds, and 12 three-beds for 29 units. And then right now, in the school building, we've currently identified 8 units. We haven't really finalized a layout for that in terms of units, but that would be, I think, 137 units, Craig, on the property. Sorry, 127 units. There's then outdoor courtyard space here in between the building. One of the things we're looking at is also kind of screening the highway with the building itself at the back of the property. That's part of the reason why we've parked around the rear of the property as well. And then there's also still the open space in front of the building. Those are covered walkways right there, but there's access to what will be an open courtyard space in that area as well. And then this is open green space. And again, trying to keep the green space and the school at the streetscape where visually it has the highest impact on that local community. So those are sort of the strategies that we've employed. And as we get later into this, you'll see a little bit kind of why putting that larger building in the back is important. This is a rendering, and so we have, renderings are never sort of exact, but it's kind of the best we can do with the information we have. So there's actual civil grade information put into here. So the grading is real. The massing of the buildings is real, and it's a perspective. So it's as close as we can digitally represent in terms of what is being proposed. So you have the school building in the front. Right now, that's just being shown as open space. This is that driveway that loops around. This is shown as a 3-story building with a gable roof on top. And then as you go to the back of the site, down further, you can just kind of sort of see it, is that 4-story building, but because it's down a story in grade, you actually don't see a lot of it from the street. There's different ways to design this 3-story building and the 4-story building as well, but let's look at this 3-story one since it's front and center. This could be a flat-roofed building. It would be shorter, but it wouldn't have those traditional New England forms. It could be, it could have these gable roofs. We could pull the eave line down a floor, and the building would feel shorter and would have those traditional forms. It would probably not be great if we were trying to achieve passive house or other kind of sustainability measures. It'd be very challenging and expensive to do that, and it would definitely drive the project cost up. When you have space under roof lines and you're trying to do dormers or you change your structural location, it increases the cost of the project per unit. And so those are some of the trade-offs that we're trying to balance and weigh, and that's part of what we want to hear from all of you tonight in terms of which of those topics you sort of value more. Which thing do you want to win? Is it sustainability? Is it aesthetics? Is it height? What is it? We haven't really gotten past on the building design. We're really at that layout standpoint. We kind of know what the footprints of the buildings are going to be based on the number of units and how we've located on the site. But we haven't designed this at all. We put in those windows just so that the building would have a little bit of texture and you get an idea of scale. But they haven't been related to units. We haven't picked siding colors or any of those things. We are looking at using local, regional sort of architectural style, something that would fit in New England, things that would have maybe clapboard siding, maybe a stone veneer base, traditional forms, things that would be familiar to this region and that you might see similar material palettes on the residences in the adjacent neighborhood. So that's sort of as far as we've gotten with building design. These are just examples of other projects. This is, you may be familiar with this downtown. This is a Portsmouth Housing Authority project right here in downtown Portsmouth. These are primarily affordable housing projects. And you can see there's not always a lot of detail, there's not a lot of changes in depth because there's projects are trying to limit cost expenditures. But they're comfortable residential aesthetics that use traditional local materials. And these are just examples. Again, we haven't really gotten beyond this for design. These are other examples. Some of these have a little bit more of a modern aesthetic, like this one. One of the items we are looking at is these, you'll notice, have walkout units on the first floor. We will be definitely looking to do something like that as it relates to the courtyard in that L-shaped building, because we think that'll provide a lot of sort of residential activity and make that a welcoming community space. So those are some of the strategies that we're looking at using as far as amenity space. And with that, I think we're up to the amenity slides, Lori. So I'm going to pause here and actually go back. I'll start with the site plan, but if you want me to forward to the rendering, I can do that. And I'll just pause for questions about the building, the architecture, how it's laid out. And the one thing I will tell you is last week I had a really bad cold, and yesterday I had to fly. And so you got to yell at me. It sounds like I'm underwater.
I'll help you.
Right? Yeah.
First of all, thanks for the explanation. You've done an annoyingly good job of running questions with all these answers you've given us. But in regards to the height of that building in the back, it seems like you've tried to do a good job of keeping it down to a specific size limit. Is the restriction on the height of that building down to just the amount of space for like parking or something, or what's the reason for keeping that down in height? Why do we care?
So I think there's a few reasons. One of them is definitely related to parking. So let me jump back a little bit. So if you were going to approach this site and say, how do I maximize the value of this site in Portsmouth to get the most housing units we possibly could? You would tear everything down, you would scrape the site, you would have probably 3 rectangular buildings, they would be super efficient, and you would get 300 units, and then the rest of the site would mostly be parking. And you would try to maintain whatever the minimum requirements are for open space. That doesn't feel like a very nice thing to put in a community, so we didn't want to do that. And so we're trying to balance the need for the number of units with what the site offers. One of those items is, what can we park? And we are following Portsmouth guidelines for parking in terms of the number of units that we have. We're also looking at, do we need spaces for public amenity, what's going in the school. So part of it is parking. And then part of it is what feels comfortable in terms of what's left for open space. But another item that we've heard along the way at other public forums is that the community that lives in this area, these abutting lots, are concerned about the height and the massing and the scale of a building on that property. And one of the things that we heard was that height was important, especially in terms of the street, because it was still desired to feel like a residential neighborhood. Because this is the taller building at 4 stories, and because grade drops down a story, it essentially, both of these buildings end up being an equivalent height on the site, which is lower. And 3 stories or 2 stories under roof sort of feels more equivalent to what you would expect in a residential neighborhood. And by having them screened by the school on the street, in perspective, it feels even smaller. So all of those things are being balanced. Some of them are practical, technical reasons like parking, but some of it is just what we've heard in comments along the way. Yep.
Will the 3 components that you described, will they be performed simultaneously, or will there be a delay in each facet that you presented here?
We haven't talked. We do have a construction partner, Ekman Construction, but we haven't talked to them about construction sequencing or phasing yet. We will. It is highly likely that we will work from the back of the site forward, and it is highly likely that this building would start the project, and then we will work our way out.
Will there be any additional traffic studies? There has been one presented by PHA. I don't think a lot of people were very confident with the numbers that were revealed, but is there going to be an additional parking study or traffic study done?
I'm going to hold that question until the civil engineer is up.
Okay.
They can speak to that much better than I can.
I just have 2 questions. One is, what is the cost for each unit going to be? And are you going to keep the name Sherburne School?
Those are probably questions for Craig. Do you want to answer that now or later, Craig?
Later. I'll make a list here.
PHA will speak to that.
Let's try to focus the questions specifically on, like,
Architecture,
the aesthetic-
building,
Yeah.
kind of.
There'll be
Big
time
idea.
for other questions and answers later.
Can you talk a little bit more about the uses for the 8 units in the existing building? And the reason I'm asking is that I know that one of the proposals had artist live workspace there with a potential shared studio space or potential gallery space. And I just want to know if that's high on your list or in the back burner or what?
So there'll definitely be residential units of some form. It's still an open question of whether those will be able to be live work studio spaces. I think we would like them to be. We need to make sure that that's practical and can work. But that's still an open question. It hasn't been determined if they'll be just standard affordable housing units or if they'll be able to be live-work studio spaces.
What would be some of the factors that would make you go one way or the other on that question?
So one of the big ones is just the constraints of an existing building. This building is really efficient for reuse if you want to make it a school or a school museum. Turning a school into housing is tricky. That might be one of the things that might make it really actually be great for live workspace, because you may end up with larger spaces that don't really work well for units. But part of it is just as we get into the building and see what the infrastructure is, we haven't done a layout within the existing school yet. We haven't even been in to scan it yet. So some of it is just what can physically fit and function in the space for the living.
Has there any consideration been made for retail space?
We haven't
Grocery
discussed
store, something
retail
like
space at all. And I think part of it is, one, we've heard I think a lot from the folks that live in this area that they wanted to maintain a residential feel, and they want to feel community. And that's part of the reason why we are very focused on what does this space feel like? What does that courtyard feel like? What does this space feel like? We want those to be active community spaces. And I think the parameters that came out in the public RFP were really focused on, we want to use this opportunity to get housing for Portsmouth. And so we haven't looked at things like retail space.
Do you have anything that shows that triangular parking lot? Like, where does that sit? Is that like where the Sugar Shack was? Is it that open field on the side?
It's to the right of the school.
Okay.
So I think like right now, I think there's like there's beehives and things over
So
here.
is there going to be entrance on Greenland Road there, or only on Sherburne Road is
So
the
there's
entrance?
right now it's shown as an entry here,
Yeah.
and you loop around behind, and there's an exit on this side. And the civil engineer will be able to speak a little bit more detail about the site plan, but that's kind of the general organization.
Okay. And then do you have any renderings of the new buildings? Because it seems like they're purposely tucked behind Sherburne School, so we can't really see them.
Well, we haven't really designed it yet.
Okay.
So this is kind of where we're at. You know, it's again, we're trying to balance all these questions,
Yeah.
and we're still seeking community input. So now we have some answers. We're not starting at zero like we were, a year and a half ago. We've gotten some input. We've gotten some parameters. What we're looking for and what this weekend is about is what are the other factors now that we're getting into a little bit more detail. And so we've determined sort of the size of the buildings and their location.
Yep.
We've talked about building height. But this is a completely made up box.
Okay.
Those windows don't relate to anything. We haven't done any design at all.
Okay.
And so one of the things we want to hear is, how important is building height versus a gable roof?
Yeah.
Would we be comfortable with a flat roof building that maybe felt a little bit more modern or not?
Yeah. Okay.
We want to hear those things so that we can work on designing this building. What we have tried to do is, make these buildings feel like 3-story buildings from the street, both the one that's taller, that's set down in the back, and this one that's attached to the school.
Yep. So is the vision that the building all the way in the back would be a flat roof potentially?
I think that's what, as a design professional, that's what I would be leaning towards.
Yep.
And a big part of why cost has something to do with it, but much more important is we're talking about pursuing a passive house sustainability level for that building. And to do that, the building envelope needs to be really, really efficient in order to get that level of certification. And a flat roof building is much more conducive to that approach.
And then all of the equipment infrastructure that runs the building would sit on the roof?
It could. If we did that, we would likely screen it.
Okay.
And even if that roof is a flat roof building, there's a number of architectural strategies that we can apply. I'm going to see if any of these have it.
Almost
One
make it
sort
like
of-
recessed so the stuff sits
Yeah,
inside.
I mean, a
even
lot
though
of
it appears
times
flat.
what I'll do is we'll put a really heavy cornice line at the floor below, and then the top floor might be light gray board and batten or something like that. And it's kind of a visual trick, but it really does make the building feel a story lower and the top floor under roof. So those are some of the things that we're talking about. But as we approach the street, and it's really relevant to that front building, that's something where maybe we don't achieve as high a level of sustainability because the gable roof feels more important than a flat roof. And so those are some of the questions that I think we want input on.
I'll come back to you.
Thank you. Can you used a phrase, the passive something, something, something. Can you define that, please?
Absolutely. So there's a number of different sustainability guidelines. Some people are familiar with LEED, which is a system that's it's kind of had its time. It was important at the time. We've moved past that. Passive House is a system that was developed actually in Minnesota in like the late 60s. And nobody really did it here. But in Germany, you can just pass edicts for things. So in Germany, they said, you will do Passive House. And everybody just did Passive House. And so it's now kind of come back because it's a much more holistic way of looking at sustainability. And it's focused on passive systems like the building envelope. The building envelope is the exterior, so all the outsides of the box. And you build the idea is you build a really efficient building exterior, and then you can heat your house with a hairdryer. That's kind of the idea. So you're reducing systems, you're able to use electrical systems, and over time it has a much lower energy footprint. So that's the idea behind it. And it's a much more thorough and exhaustive holistic process than LEED was. The only way you can do Passive House is they have a complicated sort of software that models the entire building from an energy standpoint. And you can't do Passive House unless you go through that process and check all those boxes. So, yep.
Just a follow-up question to my previous question. You said there's no consideration for a retail space, but are you saying that the neighborhood, Panaway Manor and these other neighborhoods nearby, that they would not appreciate a local grocery store or a convenience store in that area? There's nothing there.
I think it just hasn't been talked about as an idea, honestly. And I think part of it is because as we went to the public RFP process, the RFP was very clear in terms of the goals for this site being to achieve housing. And so that's what the design thought process has been focused on. So I just don't know that the question has really been asked.
Coming. I'll go to Petra and then Mary.
So since you just mentioned the RFP, I'm going to go back to that. So I'm going to go back to the master scorecard for the RFP. And on that master scorecard, obviously they scored 4 vendors. And on the third one, basically the one that scored the highest was POAH. And the reason being that they had multiple smaller scale buildings rather than a large single structure. And also, same scorecard, that they had a higher compatibility with this design to the rest of the neighborhood in the area. So my question is, it seems like you're focused on cost here versus the compatibility with the neighborhood and the height. So since we are still in the design stage, are you considering a different design instead of your basically block buildings here to be more compatible with the neighborhood? My question being that a different developer had the same design and came in with a cost that was very competitive. Can you do the same thing and give the neighborhood the smaller scale buildings and the more neighborhood feel along with the open space? If I look at the open space on your drawing, I don't know what I'd do with the open space on that corner. Are kids supposed to come out and play out there versus having the buildings in a little community circle and having tennis courts and everything that was put in there? So could you elaborate on that, please?
I can, and Craig from PHA may want to speak to that a little bit later as well. So, one, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about somebody else's proposal. We've looked at, I think, Corey, I don't know how many, but myriad site plans and layouts. We looked at a collection of small buildings on this property. We've looked at what happens if you clear the site and you do large buildings and focus on housing goals. We're definitely not just looking at cost. We're looking at trying to balance all of those disparate things that I talked about at the beginning. And all of them don't work together. I can say for this proposal, I think what we have determined is the number of units in those buildings and trying to balance it against those other factors. And so we are definitely going to be looking at how do we help this building to fit in to a residential scale. We believe that we can absolutely design a 3-story building to fit in a residential scale. And we may hear from others tonight that having that top story be under roof so that it feels like a 2.5-story building feels more comfortable. To have an appearance of sort of a townhouse look or feel facing the street might feel more comfortable. And I think a big part of why we've situated the buildings on the property where the way that we have is to provide a visual buffer to what's a larger structure in the back. The open space, and Corey will speak to the actual percentages we have on the property, but there's a lot of green space. And one of the next topics that we're going to talk about tonight is what does everybody in this room, what are some of the things that we want to see in that space? And so how this space gets used, I think is this large courtyard in the back, the small one in the middle, the front of the school, and this area over here. I think that's where we really want to hear from everybody here. What kind of things would you like to see in those spaces for open space?
I'm going to go to Mary first, and then I'll come back to you.
Hi. Hi, my name is Mary. I live in Panaway Manor, and then I'm also sitting on the Housing Committee as well. So just wanted to provide that background. You had mentioned all of the considerations and kind of like all of the values that come into a project like this and balancing all of that at the start. Everything from sustainability to the number of units to the cost to the cars to school, the streetscape and accessibility and amenities. And then you've presented this. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you balance that. I'm seeing certainly like an increase in units, which I feel like the more affordable housing units in this area is always welcome. But with that, there is a significant amount of parking now and a significant decrease in green space than what we had seen previously. And I did just hear what you said about the green space, but in the reality, that sections are actually a little bit smaller than I think might present. And so I know that you're following parking guidelines that Portsmouth has now. I'm wondering if there is opportunity to decrease some of that parking and to expand some of the green space as well. But I guess in general, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the thinking of those priorities and where and when you decided to make those trade-offs to get to this result. Thank
Sure. So it is hard. It's hard to balance that list because some of those things on that list don't work together. And I think the other thing it's hard to balance is there are both ends of opinions that we've heard on this project in terms of maximize the units or minimize the units. And so you definitely could fit 300 units on this parcel. And there are some people who want that. We've heard from others that absolutely not, that would be a disaster. We tend to think that that's probably too many units for this parcel. But we've also heard that getting a density of units to accomplish affordable housing in Portsmouth where that's a specific need is really important. And so if you look at the maximum being 300 and we're at 127, including keeping the school, that feels sort of balanced to us. The open space, and Corey again can speak to this in more detail, but I believe it's at 47% on the parcel, which is really a high number in terms of what's required in the city. And we think that we'll be able to make great use of those spaces, and amenities, I think, is the next item on the list that we're going to talk about. I think sometimes you see a big rectangle on a screen like this and it feels huge. But if it's 2 stories and a story under roof or a 3-story building, that's a townhouse, right?
That's not my question. It was more just, sorry, I love buildings. I've lived in apartment buildings. It wasn't about like being afraid of apartment buildings. It was just more about understanding the balance.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate that. That's helpful. And so I know part of it is the parking too, and that's a balancing act. In the grand scheme of things, I would love it if there was no parking. I'd love it if we all lived in downtowns because we should all be walkable. But But we are trying to meet city requirements, and we need enough spaces for the number of units that we've got. And so 47%, I think from a project planning standpoint, is a really, really high number. It's a number that we usually don't get to achieve. And at the same time, and again, this is probably a better topic for the civil engineer, there probably are some opportunities that we may be able to reduce parking. And that's something we've been trying to look at too, because we don't want to have to pave anything more than what we need to make the site work. So I'll let Corey speak to that in a little bit more detail in terms of what choices we may have for parking. But if we can reduce a little bit of the gray space, we'd like to.
Hi, since you're looking for opinions, I would, I live in Panaway Manor. I go back and forth 10 times a day there. I think from the school is a gabled roof building. The first building behind that's gabled roof. I think whatever you could do to mask the back building would be preferable. We saw it from one angle. It looks okay. I mean, you're not going to walk at 365 degrees because you get the highway there. But as much as you could mask the back building from the roof design, which you seem to be going with a flat roof, I think would be a visual addition to that. So, trying to do that as best as possible. There is a lot of pavement there. I don't know whether you would answer the question, but how many parking units or how many parking spaces have you accommodated into this facility?
So Corey will speak to the parking number.
Okay.
He's the civil engineer. I can tell you it's the number that we need for the 127 units, but he'll speak to that in a little bit more detail in terms of the specific number. But I do appreciate the comment on the height. And we intentionally took this perspective. I'll go back one slide. We intentionally took this perspective from this side because it's sort of the only way that we could demonstrate the heights. If we had shown a perspective from the front of the school, you would have even seen almost none of this building in perspective.
Right.
And so one of the things that I think we heard loud and clear when we had a community engagement session over in Panaway with the Panaway folks is, screening what's back here as new was valuable because this streetscape experience and how it exists with the existing school was really important. And that's part of the reason we've laid out the site the way we have. And so with that back building being down a story, you're 1 story lower. So it's in effect a 3-story building, the same as this building here. And so visually it will definitely be screened. I think part of the reason we actually like the idea of a flat roof, and we haven't determined that. I think as a design professional, I think it's likely to be that just from the sustainability standpoint. But part of the reason it's valuable to be a flat roof is when you put a gable roof on top of something, it's now taller. And so by being a flat roof, it's actually a shorter building, and that will help it to be screened by whatever's in the front. And I would say the other part of this too is, maybe I'm too egotistical. I think I'm a really good design professional, and whoever lives in this building in the back, we want them to have a really nice residential experience. So we're going to make it look nice. I'm going to try to design a building that feels like it's at a pedestrian scale, and that's really relevant to whoever's enjoying that courtyard. And I think for the folks in Panaway, there's not going to be gates or fences up. I think we want these to all be nice community spaces for people to walk through, to sit on a bench in that courtyard and enjoy it. So, we're going to spend some time doing a nice aesthetic design of that back building, even if you can't see it from the street.
And the only other one comment is initially back, I think in September 23. No, the meeting in 23, PHA proposed 140 units. I think there was a reaction to that from the community. The RFP that was presented to the city was about 101 units. And now you've increased that to 127, something like that. So there's a density issue. I don't know how it visually I can kind of put this in my head what you've had here, but you've increased the density by somewhat middle ground between 101 and 140.
Yeah, and so I think that's a perfect example of trying to balance the different things that we've heard, right? Because I think we heard from Panaway, we don't want that kind of density. And I think if you look at these back two buildings, those two buildings are proposed at 119 units. We also heard it was important to keep the school, and so we want to reuse that and have units in there, and that's how you get to the 127. The RFP had both a total of 101, but it was also listed as sort of that's a threshold we want to get to, and there was also a lot of commentary in there about trying to essentially get the value out of the property for the number of affordable units because that was such a need. And again, on the other spectrum, I think we've heard from other folks, we really need housing in Portsmouth, put as many units as you can on the site. So I think we've tried to walk that line and balance it between reducing from what we originally had, maintaining the school and reusing that, and try to find that middle ground.
Hi, my name is Joan. I live in Panaway Manor. And I love the idea of a passive building. And I think you might have just answered my question, but you went too fast. So if the front building had a flat roof, it would still be mostly, or at least partially hidden by the peaks from the school, right?
At least from a perspective point of view, yeah. I mean, if you're standing over here, you would see this portion of the building as a flat roof building. If you're standing in front of the school, you're going to see the school and maybe a little bit of the roof.
Right. Okay.
So.
Thank you.
And same thing. I mean, I think if I were going to design this as a flat roof building, one, it would be shorter because you wouldn't get the gable pitch on top. Two, I would use some of those same strategies to have a heavy cornice band here to change the color of that top floor and make it feel shorter. Some people feel strongly in New England about having a flat roof building because it feels too modern, it's not traditional forms, and we're in a residential neighborhood. That tends to be a matter of personal opinion, but I have found that in New England it matters, especially when there's a wide array of sort of opinions that you're trying to satisfy. Again, I think for us, the value in reducing the height in the back building to have a flat roof so it's less seen, and the value towards sustainability for the larger number of units, I think we would say we would lean in that direction because it seems to be more valuable. In the front building, where I think we have heard from the residents in this area that traditional residential feel is important on the street, that's where I think we are considering options for some type of a pitched roof on this building.
So I've heard, Peter Somsich, I've heard a couple times you're mentioning the need for as much housing as possible. So let me ask you this, and you might not be the right person to answer this, but who actually is eligible to move into this housing? Are these Portsmouth residents who'd like to live with less rent? Are they out of Portsmouth residents from other towns nearby? Are they in any way income restricted, and as far as who can be eligible to live in this housing unit? Who are these people that we're building this for?
So I'll say two things. One is, the first one and the important one is, Craig's going to speak to that in more detail. But the second one is, they're all going to be Portsmouth residents. And this is, I think sometimes we get hung up on what are the requirements, what are the trade-offs. There are going to be some. But I think in Portsmouth, what we do know is there is a need for affordable housing in any shape or form. And the people that need to live in this housing are going to be part of this community, and they're going to be Portsmouth residents.
I think maybe clarify what you mean there, Rob.
Yes. Once they move in, they will be Portsmouth residents. In units that, I think support a demographic that is much needed in Portsmouth. So Craig will talk to the specifics about who's eligible to move in, but once they're here, they're going to be part of this community.
I just have one last question for you. I know you want to get, this is important because this is what is going to make people really get on board. But can you just go back one more to the lot? So that walkway in between the two new buildings, you said that's where the grade change is?
Yep.
Okay. So does that mean you're taking a portion of Sherburne School off to create that building in the back? Like
yes.
where the gym is? That's
Thank you
going
for this
away?
question. I think I skipped over this at the beginning.
So the gym's going to go away, the wings in the back.
There are these two sort of funky legs that wrap around the gym on either side. So this proposal proposes keeping the primary body of the school in the front to maintain that massing on the streetscape. But those two legs that run down the side, we're proposing, and the gym itself, we're proposing to remove in favor of the open green space. Yes, thank you for that. I think I did not mention that at the beginning. No.
And someone, I guess just out of curiosity, I know we're going for housing, and that's why the choice is made, but there's no value in the gym space.
We've talked about that a lot. And part of it is it's a large space to try to maintain for essentially what's now a residential property. And so how you reuse it and to what value and what's the ongoing long-term cost of that, where the school, even just to reuse it, is going to be incredible. Like whatever, the 8 units that we have in the school are going to be by far the most expensive units on this property. And so part of it is the value versus the return and what that means long-term in terms of maintenance, and just how do you use it to the value of the residents that are there. So it was talked about a lot. Is there a way to reuse it? What would it be if we did? What does that mean long-term? What does that mean economically? What does it mean from an energy standpoint? All of those things. But I think the determination was, again, to kind of try to find that balance of what's the right number of units for the property in terms of what it can support and still have enough open space and all those other things. The determination was, and I think what we heard from a lot of community members along the way, the primary opinion we heard in terms of keeping the school had much more to do with, we like this old building and how it feels in the streetscape. And you hate to sort of tear down something if it does have value and reuse. Like, why would you want to? It's expensive to turn what is a school into something that's residential. But there's value in keeping that structure in terms of what it means for Portsmouth on the street, to the residents, in the open space. And if we can use it in a creative way for something like live work units, then that may be really wonderful. But sort of that back half of the school that doesn't have the same feel and character wasn't as valuable square footage. So that's sort of how we arrived there. No, oops. So these two little connectors are shown, intended to be covered walkways. So this would just be an open courtyard in between the two buildings.
I see one more question, and then do you want to have the?
Yeah, I think you should move on to amenities.
So it is only the gym that will be torn down on the school?
So, sort of. So this is the back wall of the gym, okay? On the sides of the gym, there's these two little like one-sided legs of the building that come down to around here. So those little legs are proposed to be removed as well. So the front rectangle, the primary body of the school, is proposed to stay. But everything from the back wall of the gym towards the back of the site is proposed to be removed.
I'm not seeing it.
So let me let me just try to explain it a little bit different. So let me just trace an outline with this mouse. So the existing building, the structure goes like this, and there's these little legs that come down like this. The gym is in between those two little legs on the sides. Okay. Portions of building. So from this, I'll try to speak loud, but from this, what happened?
It's a touch screen.
Uh-oh. It's mad at me now. If there's a rectangular building, there's two portions of the building that flank the gym on either side. So basically what we're preserving is that front rectangle. Everything from the rectangle back, we're proposing to remove. So the gym and the two little pieces of building that go on the sides of the gym. So wings. Wings. The wings go. So if this is the building, there's a small wing and a small wing, and the gym is in the middle. What we're saying is everything from the back wall of that front building would be removed. So the wing, and the gym. Are we back?
Yeah, let's
Sorry.
move on.
I learned something about our screen today.
Let's move on and have the engineers give a little chat about parking and green space, and then we'll move into amenities.
Got that then.
Does that work
That works.
for you?
So this is Corey Colwell from TF Moran in Portsmouth. They're a Portsmouth office as well. I won't go far.
Thanks.
Good evening, everybody. As Rob said, Corey Caldwell from TF Moran. We've been chosen to assist the PHA with the site design of this site, and we've been giving a unique challenge to try to maximize the units on this site, yet preserving open space and green space, landscape buffers around existing properties, and to provide parking in agreement with the city's requirements. So it's a unique challenge. We've done several layouts on this property, some of which maximize units, some of which have less units. We've actually done layouts. There was a question earlier about more of a townhouse feel, if you would. We did a layout there. We've done layouts as if the school building was gone. That would maximize the most units. What you're looking at, this site plan here, is the balance we've come to, which, one, gives us the most units, but more importantly, masks those units from the road, so that when you're driving down the road or walking down the road, you don't see the mass of the buildings. The Academy really offers a screen to a lot of those back buildings. Just a little bit of information about the property, a couple tidbits. I think everybody understands that the property is owned by the city. It's in the municipal zone. It contains 5.2 acres, and it has about 472 feet of frontage on Sherburne Road. The Academy is a very unique, quaint, charm, historic structure, which preservation was given to us as the utmost priority. We want to keep the look of the Academy, but you get the units in the back of the building. So as Rob mentioned briefly, the grade of the site really helps us mask those back units. If you're standing in the road, you actually have a 3-foot rise as you go up to the Academy. The floor of the Academy is about 3.5 to 4 feet higher than Sherburne Road. It then drops off in the back about 9 feet as you traverse back to the softball field. That allows us to set that back building much lower where you don't see the top. The unique thing we were able to accomplish here, if you look at the site plan, is we can get 127 units, and Rob hit the open space. Currently, without amenities, we're at 47% open space, which is a little bit unheard of in a development like this. You often have, between parking, access, amenities, buildings, courts, anything that go with it, it's rare to have almost half of that remain as green. Oftentimes, we're closer to 25 to 30%. So I think that's a fundamental improvement or really unique feature that we're able to accomplish here on the site. Not only that, we're offering landscaping between the parking and each property line, and some landscaping towards the front entrances to help buffer these units from the adjacent abutters. The parking that you're looking at up here is driven by a formula in the city's zoning ordinance. So if we have a unit that is 750 square feet or larger, we're required to provide 1.3 spaces per unit. If we have a unit that is less than 750 square feet, we're only required to provide 1 space per unit. When you do that calculation of all the 2 and 3 bedroom units, 127 units, it comes out to the need of 170 spaces. The site plan you're looking at has 175. We're hoping to fit even 5 or so more. And the reason we want to fit more, slightly more than what's required, is to provide some community space for the use of these amenities. We're going to get into amenities a little later and get your preference on some of the amenities you'd like to see here. But just understand the amenities are not only for the residents. The amenities that we hope to provide are for the community as well. And we hope to provide some extra parking spaces for the community to come and use these amenities. I'm sure there was a lot of good questions earlier for Rob about the amenities, about the parking, the green space. And I don't want to belabor the point. I think Rob did a good job of presenting the site, how it's going to look and feel. Wanted to add a little bit about how we're balancing that with green space and landscaping. And at this point, I think it's important to jump right into questions.
Hold on one second, please. Just so everyone can hear you.
Is that area served by public transportation?
Not to my
Thank
knowledge.
you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no?
I was just going to say where the bus station is.
Yes.
There's a grade change right in that walkway between the second and third building. How do you attend to that grade change with regards to parking or a thoroughfare? Because it's going to drop, I don't know, 12, 15 feet?
9 feet.
9 feet?
Right.
All right. So there still will be parking spaces at an angle, or so in what about the just general trafficking or general traffic I'm sure you have, but you've considered that grade change from a parking and a transit perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great question. There's going to be some gentle transition as you, I'm calling it leave the site, because on this layout we have it one way coming out, but there'll be a gentle transition here, and there'll be, as you approach this area here, it will be a little steeper, but it won't be such steep that it's impossible to traverse. But then as you get back here where the parking is, this area is all relatively flat where all that parking is. So it's probably going to be a gentle transition, a change in grade this area, and then a gentle transition out. So we have considered that in the design.
With as much blacktop that's there, what about the drainage of any rain or other factors?
Sure.
Where is that going to go?
Yeah, stormwater is a big concern, and when you have that much rooftop and that much building, we have to treat. And some of the there's a lot of green space left over for some of this drainage. We've got green space here, we've got green space here, and we've even got some space behind the parking lot here. Naturally, that drainage wants to flow towards the back. So we haven't designed it yet. Again, this is the conceptual stage, but we have left areas of green space to accommodate for drainage. Another thing we've done successfully lately, too, is drainage treatment can go under the parking lot, and may be the situation here.
I just have a quick question because I'm kind of perplexed. You said overall you're having 177 spots for parking, and you're having 127 units. We know, as someone who taught out there, I know that there is not much, there's no public transportation currently. So I'm thinking 3 units potentially could have 2 drivers, 3 drivers, and potentially 3 cars. I'm thinking 2 units could potentially have 2 cars. So where would they park if you only have 177 units of parking? Where would the overflow be? Where would your visitor parking be? I don't see that built in, and knowing that there really isn't public transportation, so you're going to have some kind of personal transportation. I don't see where, I know that street, you really can't park. Maybe a few people can park out in front of the school. I'm standing there with election day and I'm seeing people, but you know, that could cause even more havoc. Where are you perceiving that the overflow, friends visiting, holiday parking is going to be?
Sure, great question. So it's 170 spaces that are shown now on the site plan at 127 units. So we are counting for several having 2 cars, right? If we had to do more, there's an opportunity in this area right here, and there's an opportunity in this area, and it could even be expanded out in this area. You could get a few parallel parking spots if you wanted along Sherburne. We opted not to do that. But this area right here would be targeted for extra parking. Now, just keep in mind, we can't, if it can't fit, the unit count has to come down, but we're confident it can fit. But it's that balancing act between number of units and parking spaces that's driving this thing. So there is some extra spaces in here for parking. Earlier, we did have, we had about, I think it was close to 20 spaces. You can see how there's an island there. In an earlier rendition, we did have this coming out, and there were 20 other spaces that would fit there. We chose not to do that, to plant landscape in this area to be sensitive to this abutter. We want to provide as much screening from this parking as we can. But this area would be the last resort, but could fit another 20 spaces as well.
We have a question over here.
Are you the person we're supposed to talk to about traffic?
Yes.
Okay. So everything enters and exits on Sherburne?
Yes.
And with the new stop sign added on Greenland Road Extension, we already have pretty bad backup there. Has anyone really kind of thought about what the impact of traffic leaving this parcel, if they're all going to leave Sherburne to go up to 33 or go on to Borthwick?
Yeah, so one of the things that we will be doing is an updated traffic study. That all has to be taken into account in that traffic study. It all goes to Sherburne Road. It's going to have implications to that intersection with Greenland Road. One of the things we felt may help with some of this is there was an earlier rendition where we had two-way traffic going in and out. And on this rendition that you see, we have one-way traffic coming in, circumventing and going around. And the reason for that is we wanted all exiting traffic to be as far away from the intersection with Greenland Road as we possibly could. So that will help a little bit. But the traffic study, we've done an initial traffic study before we got to this count of 127 units. That will be updated to reflect the 127 units here.
Is there any chance to exit behind Orchard Park out on Borthwick?
That would require negotiations with this landowner. I think that would mean easements, and it would be residential traffic throwing through that commercial space, which we would not do as a first choice. We've not gone there yet because goal one is to try to keep the traffic exits and entrance points to Sherburne Road.
Seems like there's going to be a backup from that stop sign that could add into this parcel of land now with all that.
Yeah, and I guess the important thing to remember is the traffic to residential developments is primarily morning and night, right? It's 8 a.m. and it's 5 p.m. and that's probably when you're experiencing some of the backups on Greenland Road. You know, I think there was some improvements recently done to that area, and I don't know how whether that's improved it for the folks out at Panaway Manor or has not improved it or touched it, but it's a legitimate concern, and we expect that there will be a full review of the traffic analysis to make sure it works.
Peter, go ahead.
This parcel is in close proximity to I-95. Are you designing anything natural in or otherwise to mitigate the sound on this side of the highway?
Yeah,
since
so-
this is new development?
Yep. The sound mitigation is going into the architecture of the building. That back building, primarily on this wall, would probably have features like triple pane windows, more insulation, deafening insulation, foam insulation, something to that effect. So that has already been discussed and will go into the design and architecture of that back building. That's the best sound mitigation that we can provide.
So it's on the buildings only, not on the exterior green space?
Correct.
Thank you.
We have a question over here.
I have a question. So I live in Panaway Manor. At some point in the past, that road, I guess it's Sherburne Road, was redone, and there's a curve put there, which is terrible for people who are coming in and leaving the neighborhood. I don't know if anybody agrees with me that why was that redone? We reduced so much space there that when the school bus comes, I barely have enough room to not hit his house or the pole there, right? So I just want to make a comment that was a terrible decision, whoever decided to do that, right? Almost everyone, I think, agrees that who lives in that neighborhood that addition to narrow the road, which I think is only going to be exacerbated by putting 170 cars there, right? So now we're going to have to deal with this terrible idea of narrowing the road. Set aside, though, the water pressure in our community is not that great, right? Have you considered what putting 130 units is going to do to our water pressure? Is that on the same line? Is that on a different line? You know, I don't want to get a trickle out of my shower when there's just enough going right now. That, you know, I think everybody wants to put the preferences of the people who don't even live here yet above the people who already live here and actually pay taxes.
Yeah. Understand. Good question. We did have a meeting about a week ago, might be 2 weeks now, with the Department of Public Works. And we were told at DPW that the water line is adequate, but we will be doing flow tests. We'll be hiring a consultant to do flow tests to ensure that pressure not only is adequate for this development, but that it doesn't negatively affect the downstream users of the water line. So we've started to look into that now, and more studies and flow tests will be done to ensure that pressure is provided throughout.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, thanks. So it looks to me like there are 5 bus stops on Borthwick. So, and I thought there was one on Greenland Road, and if there's not, maybe they could just add one on Greenland Road. So I'm not sure why we're thinking there's no public transportation there, because I think the buses go right by there.
Yeah, good thought. And just a comment. We can't provide a bus stop on Greenland Road within the public right-of-way. The only opportunity we have would be on this property.
Are we ready to move into amenities? Dun, da, da. You want to ask another question? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know the answer, but the entrance and exit strategy that you have presented here, on the exit strategy, there's a bridge that's not in its rendition, and the height of that bridge peaks just about where, well, it doesn't peak right where the exit is, but it could potentially create some safety, traffic safety, for people exiting Panaway, Holly Lane, Galterville, and then, you know, coming across a potentially significant amount of traffic exiting this facility to be a safety issue. Because that peak of the bridge, you don't know what's beyond that until you get over it, and there's not that much distance between the peak of that bridge and your exit. Just as a comment.
Yeah, understand. And one of the things that goes into our design, and when we go through the approval process with the city, is a thing called seasonal safe site distance. And we will demonstrate on the plans what that site distance is. And there are regulations that govern that. You have to have seasonal site distance for all new entrances and exits to public roads. And that's one of the things that we will be measuring and depicting on the plans.
Just a quick question about my neighbor's shower. If you do the flow study and you find that the water is impacted, what does that do to all of this? How do you adjust the plans going forward to accommodate the changes or adjustments you find after the study is done?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways. One, if it is determined that there's not enough flow for this development and the downstream users, there's a couple of things you can do. One, you can install booster pumps for this facility. Another thing you could do is enlarge the main in the road. One of those two things would have to become necessary in the event there wasn't enough pressure. We were told, again, preliminary meetings, that the water is adequate for this development, but it was prefaced, or it was then later stated that, however, we want you to do these flow tests and demonstrate to us that, and we're not going to be doing it, we'd be hiring a consultant to do it, that they want proof, DPW, that flow does exist to the downstream users and to this development. And those tests are typically done at the hydrant. I'm sorry, wouldn't it be? Yeah, unless they hung it from a bridge. That's a really good point. Yeah, it wouldn't. There is none? Okay. So the adequacy that DPW was pointing to was primarily for this development, would have no effect on Panaway Manor. Good point, thank you.
I hope you get your trickly water fixed then. Any other questions at this point? We're going to move on to amenities next and get your input on what you want to see.
Thank you.
Okay, Rob, you want to come back? So we're going to try to get this piece done in 10 minutes so that we have a final 15 for a little more Q&A. The session is ending at 7:30. We want to respect everyone's time. So we're going to be really efficient. Rob, can you do me a favor and describe the amenities that are potential options with brevity?
So all we've done so far is brainstorm ideas. And so this may not even be an exhaustive list. You might have some that you mentioned to us later tonight before you go. But it's likely that somewhere outside of the residence, we may have things like grills. We may have some pergola or sunshade structures, definitely outdoor seating or plantings. We've looked at, because we have a grade change, are there opportunities to do things like lawn seating, something like that? We've talked about things like pickleball courts. Mostly we've found that people either love them or hate them because of things like noise, but there's opportunity for public recreation of some fashion. We may have some structures on the site along walking pathways. In the background there, you can see a playground. We've also shown one here. That might be a possibility in front of the school, in one of the courtyard spaces along that right-hand side. We've talked about potentially community gardens, workout areas for not just kids, playgrounds for older folks. Just open green space, pathways, benches, walkways are nice. We will probably have facilities so that people can clean up after their dogs, but definitely an area that residents from the neighborhood can walk through. Benches. Here we've shown some table games. Definitely some structures for bikes, maybe even covered structures for bikes. So that's not an exhaustive list, and you'll see around you, you've got some lists on the boards over here as well. But that's sort of the things that we've talked about to date. And I'll just flip back real quick to the site plan, just so you can see the opportunities are, we have this large courtyard space in the back. This is where that grade change is. There's a smaller courtyard that's accessed through covered walkways here, so open. That area in front of the school, and then this portion of the property here. All of those are, quite reasonably sized open spaces to do some of the things that we're talking about. You want to take it from there?
Yeah. Oh. Hello? Hello? Is this thing on? Maybe it turned off. Okay, so you see in front of you dot stickers. I want you to use, so we have the list of amenities on 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces of chart paper around the room. I'm going to leave the blank chart paper open. So if there's something that's not listed already, and it's an idea that maybe Rob just mentioned that we didn't capture, or it's an idea that you have, you can jot it down on the other list. With your stickers, I want you to put as many stickers as you want on your sheet of paper, on whatever amenities it is that you really want to see. So if you are like, we have got to have a community garden, I don't care if there's anything else that happens over there, we have to have a community garden, you can put all your stickers here. You can spread them out, like you really want picnic, community garden, and a dog area. You can select whatever it is that you want, use as many stickers on your sheet as you want. And what we're going to do after tonight and Saturday is we're going to take a look. You'll be able to see visually tonight, kind of clearly, where people's energy is. But we'll take a look at this more clearly after we complete the second session. Are there any questions?
Does this qualify for the public
Craig, do you know?
I don't think we've talked about it as intending to. This is really just a conversation specifically about amenities, so not necessarily related to public art. We haven't had a discussion about this qualifying for that at all.
So I'm just wondering, certain city projects are required to have a PBR.
So why don't you jot it up on the other?
Definitely put it on the other, but
Jeff?
just know, we haven't talked about these amenities in relation to qualifying for a public art conversation.
And I also want to just remind everyone that these are ideas. They're still in the conceptual phase. So as we stated, this isn't a community engagement session. So they're going to take your ideas and move forward with that. They don't want to build something that you don't want to have.
If something is added to the open chart, are you going to be including that in this weekend's and next week's as part of the list as well, in case people don't think of it and they're like, oh, that actually is a good idea.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, if we had thought of it, we would have put it up already. Yes, absolutely, we'll do that.
Any other questions about what we're about to do?
Behind you, Lori.
Yeah.
We're placing our preference as
people.
as the public. Mm-hmm. What are the residents of this community going to want?
Well, I think it's maybe safe to say that most people tend to like the same things. So we've got to start somewhere. And we certainly want to know what the community wants to see there, because it's not just for the people that live there. It's for the entire community.
Yeah, I think I would just add to that. I think our office does thousands of multifamily housing units across the country. I think generally, if we weren't talking to anybody, if we were doing this project for a private developer, we could predict within a range generally what developers find to be successful and desired among the majority of their residents. But that's not what this conversation about. This is a public space. This is a parcel that the city is using for the goal of housing in the community. And there's neighborhoods around here that can walk here. So this is about what kind of things would all of you like to see. I know what to go put in a multifamily project on a site. That's not what this is about. This is about, you're going to have the ability to go and walk through this space. What would you want to interact with? And then I think we're going to try to plan it to be nice for the residents here as well.
Is everybody ready? One more question. It's okay. I'm getting my steps in.
Corey, my question is simply, I see trees represented here and not here. So can I
Green
assume
space.
that, but in the green space, in other words, instead of just having open lawn?
Yeah, so
that-
I don't know how that didn't, I don't think that, Nilsay didn't maybe make it on the list over here, but that was what this image was about, right here at the bottom. Sometimes just open space is nice, and maybe a walkway or bench.
There's a difference between open space
And foliage, sure. Yeah. Yeah, so, and those are things
A
too, right?
manicured
Trees or landscaping. Plantings also, right?
So maybe pop that over on the other, like a more manicured green tree space. Okay, move to one of the stations and vote away. I'm going to ring the bell when it's time for you to come back. And you really only have 5 minutes now. You're doing great.
It's a good conversation, questions.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really engaged group.
Q&A with Craig. It's got a ring.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think anyone's having as much fun tonight as I am. One second. Okay, so for this next 10 minutes, you are going to have an opportunity. First of all, Craig is going to answer the questions that have already been asked, that he's the person with the answer. And then there will be another opportunity for you to indicate that you have a question. What I'm going to ask for this session, because we need to do this like a speed round, you can ask your question of Craig. Craig will provide you an answer, and we will move on to the next person that has a question. We can no longer do the back and forth conversation at this point because we're eating up too much time. Capisce? Might I introduce you to Mr. Craig Welch?
Thank you, Lori. I think we were going to summarize the amenities, which we wanted to do because there's all kinds of great stuff up there. And there's the people keep asking us about a splash pad, and so I'm glad you included that as well because that's been a source of discussion. So that's great, and some other. So all this be considered. Public art is a tradition here in Portsmouth and even required in a lot of cases. So I think that's a great point as well. We did at Roost Place. There was already some public art that we built around that was good. So all of this will be considered and summarized. And I probably didn't write down all the questions you have, but we'll leave time. And I will stay till midnight if you guys want to talk about this or give us feedback, like however long it takes. We don't yet know, Esther, about cost per unit, but I think we have to keep it under $360,000 a unit. It's all going to be relative. In order to get the tax credits, it's going to be relative to the prior year is where they set whatever the I don't know what the formula is, but whatever was funded the prior year, that becomes a standard for the next year. So my guessing is that we've got to keep it under that, and it's really hard to do. So right now we have unknowns. We don't have the building priced out yet, but that's what we're thinking. The Christ Church project that we're working on was, I think, the highest cost project that got funded. And there was a lot of more expensive one, but you have to be able to build to cost. Oh, what that cost? Forgive me. Okay. Your other question was about keeping the Sherburne School name. I think we're not there yet at all. But whether that's the school or the whole development or whatever, we're going to be leasing this property in order to build this, but the city's going to own it, and so that won't be our decision, and everybody will be able to be a part of that. I also want to thank this housing committee. You guys, several of you guys are here. I thought you did A+ work. Everybody was so articulate, and that was really great stuff. And the cost. And Peter had also asked about who's going to live here. And so at Roost Place, actually, we did have a preference for people, and we're doing this too. We're building this with the local workforce in mind. And so, because there's all sorts of public policy goals that meets. And so Roost Place was built, and it has a local working preference. And I was asked for those numbers at one point. I don't have where folks came from, but not everybody was from Portsmouth, but I think there were 2 people out of the 64 units who were from Massachusetts, and then everybody pretty much in this area, a couple in Carroll County and stuff. But what we'd like to do is prioritize people who are working in Portsmouth. In terms of if the building were to be placed in service today, so we don't dictate these numbers. The HUD comes out and changes these numbers every spring. So if the building were be placed in service today, the income levels, these are the actual levels, right? There's opportunities for us to have different rents for different income bands. And it would take me a long time to explain exactly how that works. But the target here is people at 60% of the area median income. There are ways to lease up people who are making less than that, or even less than 50% of the area median income, or potentially have some units to go up to 80% of the area median income. So basically, if your threshold here for this lower end rent structure, you got to be making under $46,000 a year. This is usually how tax credit projects work, is that they're limited to people at 60%, that 55,000. And then we'll be able to have people who will be qualified all the way up to that 73,000, and you see how those go across with the different family units. Oops. That's, yes, that's household. The rent amounts are based upon based upon the bedroom size. And so it's a kind of a challenging formula, but the rent amount assumes that there's 1.5 people per bedroom. So for an example, if there was a single person who was making under $45,900, you would have the one-person bedroom limit and the two-person bedroom limit, and then divide that by half to get that average. The rents are assumed to be affordable. It's assumed that you're making that you're paying no more than 30% of your income in rent, and so that's what these income bands are for. So at 30% of your gross income in rent for that income level, you're paying $14,760 for annual rent. So that's about $1,230 a month for people in that under 50% category. This is not subsidized housing like a lot of our housing with really deep income targets. So some people will say that that's not affordable, but that beats the market by a whole lot. At Roost Place, it's the same structure. We have 479 people on that waiting list who are waiting to get in to that. So there are some ways to get it lower than that, and part of it is just us doing a great job at helping. Because at Roost Place, we had originally projected lower rents than what's allowed, the maximum, but you might know that we were in a lawsuit over that. The cost went way up, so we did have to charge the maximum rent. That opened in 2022. So this is the maximum rent we can charge, but the rent that's people are paying at Roost Place right now is $1,150 a month. So that's also relative to how much this is going to cost, which is relative to all kinds of other things, amenities and sustainability and all that kind of stuff. So we do want to keep the costs low in order for us to keep the rental prices low, because we're a nonprofit, and that's our only incentive. We don't have to make money on this or satisfy investors or make profit. Yes.
We heard earlier that the 8 units in the school building that's being repurposed are more expensive to create. With the rental prices, would that be reflected in the rental prices in that building, or is everybody just come under the same cover no matter which building?
Everybody will come under the same cover, yeah. Unless the city wanted to sell the building and somebody wants to put condos in there, some $900,000 condos in there, then that wouldn't. But what we're proposing is all affordable units, and so it'll all be in this income category.
Just to follow up, how many units in the place will be at this rate, and how many units in the place will be at a higher rate?
We don't know that particular that breakdown, but by bedroom size, we were having the scenario that we've had most recently is 61 bedrooms, 35 2-bedrooms, and 24 3-bedrooms. The private marketplace is really not building a lot of 3-bedroom units, so there's a big demand for 3-bedroom units. And the city in the RFP process said explicitly that they wanted this to be a family development, and therefore a larger number of 3-bedroom units. So that's unusual, that there's that many 3-bedroom units. It's not as economical to do that. Obviously, you get more rent per square foot for smaller 1-bedroom units than you do 3-bedroom units, which is why the private marketplace is not building.
One follow-up question. So at what point will you know what your percentages are going to be of the lower rate and what percentages are going to be of the higher rate?
We'll have a financial pro forma done by June in order for us to submit a preliminary application for the federal low-income housing tax credits. The model that we have here is a little unusual because it was the Tax Reform Act of 2017 that changed the way the tax credit program works, and we were the first development in the state to use this income averaging, to have several different income bands. Typically and always, it's only been under 60%. So it depends. So the goal, that's why I say the target is somebody making 60% of the area median income. So if you want more units at that 80% of area median income, you just have to have more units that are targeting a lower program. So we'll end up trying to balance that relative to what the cost, we'll have some preliminary costs and everything like that at that time.
Wait. Here first?
Scroll through the timeline of the project? Could you scroll through the timeline, and I have one other additional question after that?
And I just want to acknowledge, I want to be respectful of time. So if you have to take off because it's 7:30 now, please do. I want to be respectful of time, but I'm going to be here. I'm going to be here all night. So we're doing this right now, and with these community meetings, and we did start this in 2022, but this is what's happening now. These community meetings, we want to come out of this and confirm these development goals. Did I have a microphone?
Yeah, let me see.
So we want to confirm these development goals quickly. The city has asked us to move this along so we can get something in the ground as soon as we can so people can move in. The planning board submissions will go on this spring, and then we'll be getting financial commitments and doing all the financial work in March and June. June is a big date because we have to submit the preliminary application for the tax credits. And we don't know how many projects will be up in New Hampshire. They're very hard to get with. There was 16 applicants last year, and 5 got funded, including us. By September, we need everything done. We need full approvals for everything, state, local, federal, whatever it is, in order for us to put in a full, much more complex package by September. So that's a lot of work to do. By December, the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority is going to make their decisions about who wins these tax credits. And then that will lead to, hopefully, a spring 2026 construction start. If we can complete that construction by, call it the fall of 2027, by the end of 2027, we should be able to place the building in service, and with the idea of having it fully occupied. I say the building, but the development, to have it fully occupied by the end of 2027. Everything has to go right.
Still recording too.
Okay. All right.
So-
Great. Thank you.
Well, yes. So it was Craig. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand this. We were told before that anyone who moves into this facility will become a resident of Portsmouth, which is obvious. But my question before was, that means that anyone who wants to move there can move there. And I say this because I was offered my home as sale for someone in New York City who wanted to buy it.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the income limits, which I appreciate. So basically what we're saying is the city of Portsmouth is providing municipal land for you to build this project, meaning we are losing some revenue from the city in exchange for getting this project, which basically anyone can move into if they're within the income limits. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We can't exclusively have all of our other properties do, but there's been some changes in fair housing law and stuff. But we do have a local preference with all of our properties right now. At Ruth Lou and Griffin Place, we have a local working preference. So it's really for that workforce in mind. If somebody were to move up here from New York City and get a job in Portsmouth, then you could see them coming to the top of that you could see them coming to the top of that list, right?
Just really quickly, on the multi-bedroom units, is the intention for adults and children?
Yes.
So like a 3-bedroom would be 3 working adults?
Not 3 working adults, but adults and children.
Okay.
Yeah, we only have 1 and 2 bedrooms downtown at Bruce Place, but I think there are 16 kids that are living there now. It's an awesome place for kids. We didn't expect that many, but yeah, so there will be a mix of single parent households, 2-parent households with kids or anything like that.
Question.
Yes.
Do you do criminal background checks on people who are going to come into these units, right? So, it's going to be in our neighborhood. We don't want felons, murderers, pedophiles in our neighborhood.
Yep.
I'm not saying that people will be, but do you conduct criminal background checks on your applicants?
Yes. Everybody has to go through a criminal background check with a system with the state police department.
So no murderers or felons, or what's the threshold? Someone who breaks into cars is good, but someone who kills people is not? No, no, not subsidized. But I would like you to. I would like you to answer the question.
Yeah.
I would. Where's my positive intent?
I'm assuming it with your.
No, you're not. I would like you to please answer the question. What's the threshold of criminality that's allowed?
I wouldn't say there's a specific threshold, but so if you have somebody that's convicted of a felony drug crime in 1990, should they be excluded from the property?
The question is,
Yep.
Are felons allowed in the property?
No, there's not going to be. We're not going to have people who have felonies, recent felonies, in the property. But
I said felonies, not recent. Felonies.
Can you move on from this?
yeah, I'll stick around and we'll stick around and talk to you about the nuances of background checks. But we'll talk about the nuances of that. I do want people to know that just because you're a low or moderate income people in this community, you are not at a higher propensity to commit crimes. So, yes.
Craig, I'm looking at your timeline here, and the December to get the tax credits, this is very competitive. Do you have a plan B if that doesn't happen, and how would that plan B affect your timeline?
Yeah, if we don't get these 9% tax credits, because a lot of people don't, then we will be pushing out that deadline. There's different kinds of tax credits. There's other money that we'll be applying for at different things, but these low-income housing tax credits provide a very significant amount of equity for this project. Bruce Place was a $16 million project. There was $8 million that came in using those credits, and that's how all affordable housing in the United States is built. So the plan B is to keep going.
So what's the timeline? Is it a year? I mean, I'm thinking about the church, the delay with the church now.
Yep.
Not moving forward. Would that be the same situation here? You would be out a year with the cost increasing as we wait? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah. Yep. Yes, Mary.
Hi, I have a question. I don't understand this or know about this. Is there an opportunity to allow for like roommates if there were a 3-bedroom? I think a scenario of this is like, what if they're all paras at the elementary school and they all could live together and their income levels also probably could match? So is there an opportunity for that, or is it just families?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you look at the household income, it would be nice if the single person household income was X, and then for 2 people it was double that, but that's not necessarily the case. So if there's 2 people or 3 people living in a unit, it starts to be kind of likely that they'll exceed those income limits unless one of them is a full-time student, one of them is a child. But yeah, there's no, we'll have certain occupancy rules, but there's no restriction that 2 people living in a unit have to necessarily be family. Eric.
Thank you for such a question here. It's been mentioned that. It's been mentioned that the Sherburne School itself could potentially be mothballed. Are you projecting this project to be complete? And it was discussed that this might be a phased project with the back units coming first and then moving forward. If the Sherburne School is mothballed, how long do you project that mothballing to take place? And will there be any attention given to that school to make sure it doesn't deteriorate to a level that isn't subject to repurposing?
I promised that I would never use the term mothball again.
You did.
And I just did. So, yeah, I mean, our original contemplation was if there was any uncertainty about the future of the school, say you wanted to keep it as a community center or make a library or make a grocery store, by giving some more time for the community to contemplate that kind of thing, that's where we ended up using the term mothball. But I hate using that, Eric, because I know you've asked that a lot of times. But that's all that was. So we are going forward with we don't want there to be any uncertainty. We're going to go forward to get something approved that's this plan or something close to it that's entirely housing and all in one fell swoop. Now, that doesn't mean that the construction, Rob had said something about the construction starting in the back and moving to the front. If the sequence based upon whatever construction management plan we have to do with Public Works, or if you're going to use a certain kind of financing that takes a long time, that takes a bit of a longer time, then it'll all be approved, and we will apply for the tax credits, and we'll have a financial pro forma for the entire project to be done in one phase. But it could change. That could change. There's still a lot of unknowns.
So when you say a completion of fall of 27, it might not include all 3 components of the facility, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's still so much you don't know. We try to we try for this stuff to be predictable, but it's not always. Somebody had brought up another financing tool called the historic tax credit. So that's a different kind of tax credits, and if we were renovating the school to put housing in, we would definitely, don't have to, but we would want to go after that as a financing source. If we're using this money to apply for these historic tax credits, then it triggers another level of historic review. We've already pulled the trigger. We're currently doing a Section 106 historic review to see if this building is eligible for the National Registry. And that's a state process right now with the Division of Historical and Cultural Resources. If we're going to use these historic tax credits, this becomes a federal process. And if anybody's been around this community for very long, they know that dealing with the Department of Interior can take a while, as evidenced by a property in the center of, I'm getting cut up, we don't want to say the M word. So in working through the Department of Interior, in order to get these credits and get those approvals, you could definitely see a timeline that would delay the construction on the school itself. But we want to get it all approved and all financed in one fell swoop. Yes.
Is this on? Yes. Vicki, Vicki Boyd. I'm a resident of Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and I don't live in Panaway, but I was an employer for a long time over at Heinemann. And the reason I'm here and I take an interest is because we had such a hard time attracting and retaining young workers. They just couldn't find affordable housing. And we're talking about, 20-somethings that are we were offering what I thought were pretty good entry-level salaries for someone just out of college, $45,000, $50,000 a year. They couldn't live in Portsmouth, and ultimately it was a reason for them to move along. So that's why I'm here. So when people are asking who's going to live in this housing, I guess what I am hoping for, I love that the Griffin Place was a place where you gave special weight to people that were working here in Portsmouth. And is there any reason why you wouldn't make that same kind of privilege those folks in the same way? Because I'd love to see the employers of Portsmouth be able to honor their employees with an opportunity for just more accessible housing.
Yeah, we are really, there's some housing, there's 16 housing authorities around the state. Some are very focused on the lowest income people, and that's really good for their communities. We are really focused on workforce housing with a goal of providing housing to our local workforce. There's so many people in Portsmouth that are already in Portsmouth. They're paying an exorbitant amount of percentage. There's like 15% of the renters in Portsmouth are paying more than 50% of their rent, which is really debilitating. And I ask all the time. I did it in line at Trader Joe's the other day. I said, it was the front end manager, and he's like, and he was helping. I said, can I just ask you, how many people who work here live in Portsmouth, do you think? Any guess? Yeah, he said he guessed 2 to 4% of people that are commuting from, he lived in Somersworth, that are commuting from the outside. We built a $250 million bridge over Little Bay to accommodate them. We built a $25 million parking garage in Portsmouth to accommodate them. I think that using, money or city-owned land is good public policy, because if there was a place to live close by that was affordable, we would do that. So thank you for that.
I can totally appreciate that. I commuted into Boston for years,
Mm-hmm.
so I could afford my house.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, there's a flip side to that story too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I appreciate that too. And we all doubled up. We all had 5 people living in an apartment like this size. That's how we made it affordable. So that happens too. Anything else? I'll stick around as long as you need, and if you want to come back Saturday or next Thursday, please do. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.